Imagine it's the year 1944. The representatives of 44 Allied states gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Inside that enormous hall, they are about to make a decision that will shape not just one day, but the global economy of the next 80 years. Think of the atmosphere there. One of the true turning points in history is unfolding before their eyes. Britain had been the world's economic superpower for more than 2 centuries, but it is now completely collapsed. Its national debt has risen to 249% of GDP, after 2 major world wars. The empire that once ruled the oceans and seas is now economically exhausted and weakened. And everyone in that hall knows it. So they decide to do something unprecedented in history. They transfer the status of being the world's reserve currency from one empire to another, from the British pound to the American dollar. But this wasn't a small, simple currency change. It was a new phase in a 500-year cycle: rise, peak, overexpansion, and collapse. Every global reserve currency in history has followed this same cycle. And today the US dollar is showing almost exactly the same warning signs that the 4 previously fragmented empires showed. That's why, to truly understand the future, we need to look a bit into the past. In 1450, the Portuguese real became the world's first true and major reserve currency. For more than 80 years, Portugal took control of global trade. This success wasn't luck. Portugal opened entirely new sea routes to Africa, Asia, and the Americas, reinventing navigation and global commerce from the ground up. When Constantinople became part of the Ottoman Empire in 1453, the old spice routes closed. Portugal's answer was bold. They sailed around the entire world, around Africa, launching the Age of Discovery. Lisbon became the center of world trade. The Portuguese real was used from Europe all the way to Asia. At its height, the empire stretched from Africa to India, Malaysia to Japan, even China. But success brought overexpansion. Maintaining military outposts across 4 continents drained the treasury. Rivalry with the Dutch, British, and French intensified. A succession crisis in the 1530s weakened the kingdom further, and by 1580 Portugal was absorbed into the Iberian Union under Spain. The Portuguese real, after 80 years, slowly faded out of dominance. Its place was taken by Spanish silver. Spain's rise came from an enormous discovery. In 1545, the richest silver deposits on Earth were found in Bolivia's Potosi Mountain. From 1575 to 1635, nearly half of the world's silver came from that mountain. Spain's pieces of 8 coins spread across the world. They're considered the first true global currency in history. The Spanish dollar was the most stable Western currency from the 16th to the 19th century, so much so that it remained legal tender in the U.S. until 1857. Spain's dominance lasted almost 110 years, roughly 1530 to 1640. Then the cycle returned. Overexpansion and debt crises. King Charles I left his son Philip II with enormous debts, 36 million ducats and 1 million more in annual expenses. Philip II refused to pay Spain's debts 4 times, 1557, 1560, 1575, and 1596. The endless flood of silver from the New World caused another problem: inflation. Prices in Spain quadrupled under Philip II. When silver production dropped by half during Philip III's rule, the economy collapsed, and Spain defaulted yet again in 1607. In 1641, the Iberian Union dissolved, and Spain's monetary dominance ended. A new power was rising: the Dutch Republic. In the 1600s, Amsterdam became the world's biggest financial center. The Dutch currency became Europe's de facto reserve currency through innovation and trade. The Amsterdam Bank created more efficient systems for international payments. The Dutch practically invented modern finance: the first stock exchange, marine insurance, acceptance credit, publicly traded company shares. From 1642 to 1720, about 78 years, the Dutch guilder dominated world trade. More than 1/3 of international commerce used it. But the Dutch also fell to the cycle. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War financially devastated the country. The Dutch East India Company collapsed under conflicts with Britain. By the late 1700s, Britain's power had begun to shine. The British pound, supported by industrial power and a vast colonial empire, became the new global reserve currency. From the 1720s to 1944, for more than 2 centuries, it ruled world commerce, the longest reign of any reserve currency in modern history. At its peak, more than 60% of world trade was conducted in sterling. London was the nexus of insurance, commodities, and global investment. The gold standard strengthened the pound even more. After the Great Recoinage of 1816, the pound was seen as the world's most trustworthy currency. By 1922, the British Empire ruled 458 million people, 1/5 of humanity, and 1/4 of Earth's land. Its financial power seemed unbreakable. But then the dark side of the cycle surfaced again. World War I pushed Britain's debt from £650 million to over £7 billion. World War II caused even more destruction. By 1945, Britain's debt reached 270% of GDP. They won the war, but lost financial supremacy. And that leads us back to the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference. From July 1st to 22nd, more than 700 delegates from 44 nations gathered to redesign the global financial system. This conference created the IMF and laid the foundation for the World Bank. Under Bretton Woods, all currencies were pegged to the dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. The shift from the pound to the dollar became official. For the next quarter century, the dollar was undisputed, until 1971, when Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility to gold. The gold standard was gone, but the dollar didn't fall. It found a new anchor: oil. After the 1973 OPEC oil crisis, the U.S. struck a major deal with Saudi Arabia. America would provide military protection, and Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in dollars. By 1975, all OPEC members adopted this rule, forming the petrodollar system. Global demand for oil guaranteed global demand for dollars. This artificial demand allowed the U.S. to run enormous deficits for decades. For many years, dollar dominance was unquestioned. In 2000, more than 70% of global foreign reserves were in dollars, but the picture has shifted. By 2024, that share fell to 57.8%. Foreign ownership of U.S. treasuries has dropped from over 50% in 2008 to 30% in early 2025. De-dollarization is unfolding. BRICS has expanded. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, joined by Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. They're building dollar-free financial systems. As of 2025, 10 BRICS members and 13 partner countries are upgrading the BRICS Bridge Payment Network to settle transactions with central bank digital currencies. Meanwhile, America's balance sheet is under pressure. As of March 6, 2025, U.S. public debt is $29 trillion. With internal debt included, total debt is $36.4 trillion, 124% of GDP. And the cycle greets us again. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, and Britain all followed the same path. They ruled between 78 and 220 years, an average of 95 years. The U.S. dollar, from Bretton Woods to today, has reigned for 81 years. We're approaching a historic threshold. Every reserve currency goes through 4 stages. Rise: a nation achieves breakthroughs in trade, finance, or military power. Portugal rose through navigation, Spain through silver, the Dutch through finance, Britain through industrial might, the U.S. through post-war industry. Peak: the currency becomes nearly universal. 60% of global transactions use it. The empire seems unbeatable. Overexpansion: this is where decline begins. Excessive military spending, rising debt, falling productivity. Portugal overstretched across 4 continents. Spain defaulted repeatedly. The Dutch collapsed in war with Britain. Britain's debt hit 270%. The U.S. today holds debt at 100 to 24% of GDP and spent $8 trillion on Middle East wars. Collapse: Confidence in the currency fades. Power shifts elsewhere. Every empire has passed through this cycle. So what happens now? History gives clues. Portugal never regained power after the 1580 Union. Spain, despite American riches, declined for centuries. The Dutch stayed wealthy but became a regional power. Britain is still strong, but after 1945 it surrendered the throne to the U.S. In the 1950s, 55% of global reserves were still in sterling, but within 2 decades that figure collapsed. The British century ended, the American century began. Such transitions never happen overnight. Britain's fall took decades. The U.S. had already overtaken it economically even before the pound lost the title. Today, something similar may be happening. This time with China's rise and a multipolar global system. Each reserve currency lasts roughly 95 years on average. The dollar is now 81 years old. And the signs are familiar. Its share dropping from 70% to 58%. Falling treasury demand. The rise of BRICS alternatives, a weakening petrodollar, 900 U.S. military bases across 130 countries. The 500-year economic cycle is stepping onto the stage again. One question remains. How fast will this transition be, and who will lead the next financial era? A slow decline like Britain, a sudden collapse like the Dutch, or a new world with no single superpower, a multipolar order? History doesn't repeat exactly, but it does rhyme. And if the rhyme continues, the dollar's dominance may be approaching its final verses. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, comment, and share it. Send it to a friend who loves exploring money, power, and the cycles of history.